sports heroes, musicians, singers, entertainers, war heroes. They all have one thing in common. It comes to an end. How did they become famous? How did they die? And where do they rest now? I'm Ed Doyle, and I'm your host for Tales of Fame and Fate. Fame, a word defined as a level of popular acclaim and high honor. For one's reputation as seen by the public. One can achieve fame because of their kind and thoughtful words and actions, for their talents, and how they're loved and admired by the public. And one can achieve unwanted fame for the same reason, but for opposite directions. Which brings us to fate. Fate, also defined as a noun, is defined as the will or the principal determining cause by which things in general are believed to come to be, assigned in advance. So the question becomes, does one's fame direct or determine one's fate? Or is fate just that, an outcome that is pre-written, which oddly enough can be the reason for someone's fame? In this tale of fame and fate, we're going to use one example of a man that was born on Friday the 13th, who became someone that was both admired for his actions and his talents, and despised for his addictions. Did his fame dictate his fate, or was his fate pre-written upon his birth on that Friday the 13th? Robert Edward Crane, actor, radio host, drummer, and disc jockey. Most noted for coming into the living rooms of millions of TV viewers each week as the sly, resourceful, and funny Colonel Robert Hogan, a World War II prisoner of war that each week would outsmart his German captors while aiding the Allies to win the war. Crane, though, would also receive unwanted fame for his fall into a life of strip clubs, sex addiction, and pornography, which some say ultimately brought about his demise. On Friday the 13th, in July of 1928, Alfred and Rosemary Crane welcomed into the world and into their family a new baby boy, Robert Edward Crane. At age 11, he began to play the drums, and he became quite good at it. He had a personal dream of being the next Buddy Rich, whom Crane idolized. As early as 16 years old, while attending Stamford High School, Crane landed a gig playing drums in the Connecticut Symphony Orchestra, and for 2 years he would excel as a drummer. Crane, however, was fired from the orchestra for clowning around during a Johann Sebastian Bach piece. After graduating in 1946, Bob went to work in a very ordinary job as a sales clerk for the Finley Strauss jewelry store on Main Street in Stamford. But with the urge to obtain fame, Crane sent out numerous audition tapes up and down the East Coast to radio stations, but received rejection after rejection, all of them saying that his voice wasn't deep enough, nor was it slow enough for their liking. In 1949, Crane decided to take a course he had learned at the University of Bridgeport in radio station operation, which was instructed by Wally Dunlap of station WICC. Despite having just married his high school sweetheart, Ann Terzian, Crane wanted more than just a normal job. Finally, in 1950, Bob Crane received a call from WLEA in Hornell, New York, offering him his first radio job. He spent only 9 months at the station, but in that short time, he was able to achieve the role of program director. Still wanting to come home to Connecticut, though, Crane continued to send out audition tapes to radio stations in his home state. WBIS in Bristol offered Crane a job, which he promptly accepted. During their first meeting, however, the executives at WBIS were stunned when they and Crane first met, because this is the first time they heard Bob Crane's voice in person. It seemed that the tape machine had malfunctioned and played his audition tape at a slightly lower than normal speed, and they were expecting a completely different voice. Still, the radio station was impressed with Crane's talent and gave him the job, and he was quickly promoted to senior announcer and program director for the station. Crane and his wife Ann had their first child, Robert David Crane, in 1951. Crane decided that he needed to move his family to California, and in September of 1956, he took a job at KNX CBS Radio in Los Angeles. Crane's showmanship and awesome ability to entertain made him one of the premier radio personalities of the time, and KNX was getting rich with Crane as their main draw. Crane became a top-notch interviewer and interviewed more than 3,000 people from 1956 to 1965, including names such as Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, Dick Van Dyke, Ronald Reagan, and so many more. Crane and his wife Ann would add to their family again on June 19, 1959, with the birth of their first daughter, Deborah. Then they would do it again with the birth of their second daughter, Karen, on November 29, 1960. There was no doubt that Bob Crane was one of the most talented individuals of his time. He was a natural. He loved performing and loved interacting with both audiences and other celebrities alike. Crane never tired, and he was always seeking out new ways to both satisfy his own needs and to showcase his talent. With the contacts that he made in the entertainment industry and the impressions that he made on the public, Bob Crane was finally about to earn his fame with the help of television and film. In 1961, Crane got his first chance to enter the living rooms of America in an episode of The Twilight Zone entitled Static, where he is heard as a radio announcer but never seen. On October 15, 1961, Crane would guest star as Harry in the General Electric Theater episode titled The $200 Parlay. It was not one of the better episodes of the series, and it was soon forgotten, but not Crane. He continued to strive for more, and in 1962, he finally landed a spot on the famed Dick Van Dyke Show as Harry Rogers in the episode Somebody Has to Play Cleopatra. In 1963, he starred in the Alfred Hitchcock Hour as Charlie Lessing in the segment The 31st of February, and from 1963 to 1965 as Dr. Dave Kelsey on The Donna Reed Show. That year, Bob Crane said goodbye to both his jobs at KNX Radio and The Donna Reed Show when he was finally offered the role of a lifetime of Colonel Robert Hogan, of what he is remembered most for in the CBS television comedy Hogan's Heroes. The show began with some criticism, some saying it was in bad taste, but it quickly became one of the highest rated shows on television. Crane was at the top of his career. From 1965 to 1971, he was America's favorite prisoner of war. During that time period, he also appeared on shows such as The Lucy Show, the game show Password, The Red Skelton Show, Arsenic and Old Lace, Love American Style, The Doris Day Show, Night Gallery, and many more. Even with the hectic filming schedule of the show, his public appearances, and the life of a celebrity, Crane was still a family man. And at that time, according to his son, Crane was a fun-loving guy. They had fun at home, and he loved spending quality time with his family. The lifestyle of Hollywood, the fame that he was gaining, and his ever so insatiable hunger for more may have all combined to start to lead Crane in a darker direction. In the late 60s and 70s, home movie cameras and equipment became affordable and available for the normal working man. It also piqued the interest of many, including Bob Crane. Crane already had a love of photography, so combined with his showmanship, creativeness, and love of gadgets, home video became a new addiction for him. Crane was also a lover of the female form. With this new medium at hand, he would often be seen filming women along the streets. And with his television fame, women wanted to be filmed by him. Crane had a darkroom in the family home where he would develop his own still photography. And it was not a secret to his family that many of the pictures that he was taking were of women in the nude and at times in some very sexual poses. They, however, viewed it as an expression of art and left it at that, even though Crane and his wife Anne would have many heated discussions about it. Unfortunately, this became an addiction to Crane, and over the next several years, Crane would seduce scores of women while filming the encounters. Anne tolerated this for a while, but it became too much to bear. She also found out that Crane was now having an affair with his Hogan's Heroes co-star, Sigrid Valdez, who played Hilda, Colonel Klink's secretary. Bob and Anne divorced in 1970 after 20 years of marriage, and several weeks later, Crane would marry Valdez on the set of Hogan's Heroes. Married to his new wife in a career that was soaring, Crane's obsession with pornography and debauchery worsened into a deep addiction that was consuming him. On April 4th, 1971, CBS aired the final episode of Hogan's Heroes, Rockets or Romance. The show and Crane's career was over. As hard as Crane tried, even with his exceptional talent as an actor, a radio announcer, and a drummer, Crane was on the downfall. He was typecast, and America only could see Colonel Hogan no matter what part he played. He did have spots on shows such as Policewoman, Ellery Queen, Quincy Medical Examiner, and The Hardy Boys, The Love Boat, and many more, but they were only bit parts. He appeared with two of Hogan's Heroes co-stars, Werner Klemperer, Colonel Klink, and John Banner, Sergeant Schultz, in a poorly made, terribly reviewed movie called The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz. Crane would even star in 1973 in a Disney movie, along with Kurt Russell, titled Super Dad. During the filming of Hogan's Heroes, co-star Richard Dawson would introduce Crane to John Carpenter, a salesman and regional manager for Sony Electronics. Dawson knew of Crane's interest in recording equipment and introduced them simply for that reason, as Dawson and Crane were not fond of each other. Crane and Carpenter discovered that they both shared their interest in recording equipment and a lust for women. Becoming very good friends, together they would go to bars and strip clubs looking for women. Carpenter took advantage of the attraction that women had for Crane because of Crane's celebrity status, and the two would team up creating their own homemade pornography with the scenes of women that they met. With a failing career and a dark addiction to sex, Crane, now with a cohort, would immerse himself in this dark world more and more. Crane still had a good side to him, though, and he wanted to prove himself as a good and talented artist. He would volunteer for numerous charities, one of his most passionate being the United Cerebral Palsy Organization. He also tried hard to make a comeback, and in 1975, he would star in the NBC television series, The Bob Crane Show. However, it was a disappointment to the network and was canceled after only 13 episodes. Crane would continue to do radio spots and small performances, but was going nowhere. In 1978, Crane, depressed and running out of hope, admitted to a counselor that he had come to the realization that he was addicted to sex and wanted help. His counselor later told reporters that he felt that Crane was a wonderful person deep down. He was caring, sensitive, and somewhat shy, but that Crane was a man trapped by a weakness that was in him, like many of us have. And that, combined with his being famous and the life that comes along with it, is what enslaved him. It was too late. On June 29th, 1978, Bob Crane was found brutally murdered in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment. Crane was found beaten to death with his skull crushed by a blunt object and an electrical cord wrapped around his neck. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence left behind by the killer, and no clues as to who may have committed the crime and why. There was no sign of a struggle, and it seemed that Crane had been killed in his sleep. The night before, Crane and Carpenter had gone to a strip club where they each went to pick up a female companion. Carpenter took one female companion home to his room 206 of the Sunburst Resort, which was only a block away from Crane's apartment. Crane returned home alone. Police determined that Crane was beaten to death with a second tripod that was now missing from the crime scene when the body was discovered. Because of the relationship that Carpenter had with Crane, and that they found photos of Crane and Carpenter engaging in a sexual act with the same women, police immediately considered Carpenter as a prime suspect. Police also found in Carpenter's rental car a blood splatter that was a rare type B that matched Crane's blood type, a blood type that only 1 in every 7 share. They also found a bit of fatty tissue that they believed was brain tissue. Unfortunately, DNA testing had not been invented yet, so the blood sample and tissue simply went into the police evidence locker. The Scottsdale police investigated the crime but could not find any hard evidence on Carpenter, nor anyone else. Finally, under pressure to bring the crime to trial, almost 16 years after Crane had been murdered, police officially charged Carpenter with the murder and brought him to trial in 1993. During the trial, police reported that Carpenter had phoned Crane's apartment twice that next day while police were at the scene, but did not seem at the least surprised or shocked that they were at his apartment or that Crane had been murdered. Carpenter also strangely 2 days later ran to Dawson's apartment saying he needed a place to stay. Was this to throw police off the track? It was no secret that Dawson and Crane disliked each other. Did Carpenter confess to Dawson that he had killed Crane? In 1993, when the case was reopened, Detective Jim Raines went to Dawson's home to interview Dawson, but he was promptly thrown out, Dawson refusing to speak to the detective. Dawson also, strangely, did not attend Crane's funeral. By the time of the trial, the brain tissue that police had in the evidence locker had been lost, and the blood sample was deemed too small and too old to test. Because of the lack of hard evidence, Carpenter was found not guilty, and the case was closed. There have been many movies, books, articles, and discussions about Bob Crane and who may have killed him. Some wild theories, and some quite compelling. Because of them, Bob Crane, though, is remembered as a dark, sick, demented man, immersed in a world of sex and pornography, rather than the talented, kind, and generous man that he started out as, and still was, but buried deep inside. Bob Crane lies here, in Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. To this day, no one truly knows who murdered him. Not even Bob Crane. The lesson that should be taken from the tragic death of Bob Crane and his story is one of addiction. Be it sexual, as in Crane's case, drug, alcohol, gambling, or lust for power. Addiction infects, consumes, and destroys those that fall victim to it and those around them. Addiction is like a dormant virus that is there deep inside all of us all from the moment we are born. Most remain dormant, locked away, never to emerge. But tragically, others find that one little spark that allows it to smolder inside until it grows into an uncontrollable and all-consuming fire that destroys everything and everyone in its path simply to feed itself. Addiction is like that of a horror movie, where one is taken over by an evil force, unable to fight against it because it gives just enough false pleasure to make you not want to fight. Addiction doesn't care what race you are, what religion you practice, whether you're rich or poor, man or woman. Addiction of any kind is pure evil, and it wants everything for itself. If you know someone that is suffering from addiction of any kind, do not ignore or abandon them. Do not help them feed their addiction because you're afraid to see them in pain. Seek help for them. Reach out today. For those you love suffering from addiction, you can call 1-800-662-HELP. For free, confidentially, you can get them help from the National Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Don't wait before it's too late, or that this is their outcome.